It's October 31st here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with Israel's military operation in Gaza. Israeli ground forces are advancing deeper into the region, rescuing the first hostage held by Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his country would not agree to a ceasefire, saying that would be surrendering to Hamas. President Yoon is set to deliver a speech at the National Assembly in the coming hours on the government's budget for next year, where the first ever talks between Yoon and the main opposition leader Lee Jae-myung could take place. Bovine lumpy skin disease has now spread to Gyeongsangnam-do Province, bringing the total number of farms with infections to 67. The government is planning to complete nationwide inoculations of cattle by November 10 to contain the spread. Israeli ground operations are expanding in Gaza, including the rescue of a soldier taken hostage by Hamas. Now, with Israel launching what they call their second stage of the war, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that a ceasefire would be the same as surrendering to Hamas. Lee Jae-myung.
An Israeli soldier who was kidnapped by Hamas during the October 7th attack has been rescued as the Israeli Defense Forces, Special Forces, and the Shin Bet Intelligence Agency conducted a ground operation in Gaza on Sunday night. Private Yuri Megadish is the first soldier rescued by Israel since more than 200 people, including dozens of Israeli soldiers, were taken by Hamas. Megadish was a member of a unit of female soldiers in charge of monitoring the Gaza border via surveillance cameras. The Israeli military says she's in good health and has met with her family. Despite the international community calling for a humanitarian ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will not agree to a ceasefire, as it would be equivalent to surrendering to Hamas and terrorism. During a press conference on Monday, the Prime Minister went on to condemn Hamas for trying to destroy the promise of Israel's future. He added that just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor or the September 11th terrorist attack, Israel will continue to fight. Meanwhile, the Israeli military announced on Monday that it had sent additional troops to the Gaza Strip as it strengthened ground operations in the Palestinian enclave. In a statement released by the military, it said that additional troops were deployed as it looks to achieve its war goals. In addition, the military announced that the head of the IDF Southern Command, Major General Yaron Finkelman, went into the Gaza Strip to assess the ground combat situation. Lee Jae-myung, Arirang News. President Yoon is set to deliver his budget speech for the 2024 fiscal year at the National Assembly in the coming hour. In his speech at 10 a.m., the president will seek lawmakers' cooperation in passing the government's proposed budget worth some 657 trillion won, or some $487 billion as the government looks to tighten spending. Ahead of the speech, President Yoon is expected to meet with the main opposition Democratic Party's dignitaries and Chairman Lee Jae-myung. The meeting, a parliamentary tradition, will be Yoon's first conversation with DP chair and former presidential rival Lee since he took office. Now, next year's budget is a 2.8% increase to the previous year's, which is the lowest growth rate since 2005. President Yoon and Japanese Prime Minister Kishida have been recognized by the John F. Kennedy Foundation for their courage in mending bilateral ties and strengthening three-way cooperation with the U.S. to promote regional peace. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
President Yoon and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida pledged more courageous efforts to pursue peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region after they jointly received a prize for their push to bolster trilateral cooperation with the United States. The John F. Kennedy Foundation held a ceremony Sunday, with the South Korean and Japanese leaders awarded as special recipients of the International Profile and Courage Award for working to improve bilateral ties, despite domestic opposition arising from historical issues. In particular, the foundation said Yoon began working towards rapprochement with Japan shortly after his election in March last year, adding that the two leaders have since built up a strong personal relationship with an exchange of visits between Seoul and Tokyo. It said such courage to choose a more hopeful future led to a historic level of trilateral cooperation with the US at their Camp David summit. The August summit produced key documents that set out a new framework for dialogue and coordination on military responses to North Korea's provocations and broader regional security, as well as economic issues and humanitarian projects in the Indo-Pacific. Accepting the honor in a video message, the South Korean leader said he was privileged to be awarded with his dear friend Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, promising even greater efforts to show courage based on utter sacrifice and dedication.
I know that this award is a reminder of my solemn duty, a profound sense of responsibility placed upon the Republic of Korea, the United States, and Japan to promote freedom and prosperity around the world by standing together in solidarity.
Yoon said as an English learner in high school, he was inspired by President Kennedy's values and worldview, which drove his push for innovation and reform, which led to social progress and scientific achievement. He mentioned the former US leader's New Frontier speech in 1960, which outlined his bold vision for the future while describing the many challenges facing America. Also in a video message, Prime Minister Kishida said he would work to open a new era in Korean-Japan relations based on his friendship with and trust of President Yoon, and that with the US, the three Pacific powers would contribute to peace and stability in the region. Previous recipients of the Courage Award include Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky last year, Presidents Barack Obama and George W. Bush, and former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. 오수영, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. are taking part in a large-scale joint aerial exercise until this Friday. And watchers say the drills, which are aimed at better preparing the allies for actual combat, may trigger a response from North Korea, including retaliatory measures. Choi Min-jung reports.
Seoul and Washington are currently conducting round-the-clock aerial drills dubbed Vigilant Defense in the skies around the Korean peninsula. The 5-day exercise, which kicked off Monday, involved some 130 South Korean and U.S. aircraft, including Seoul's F-35A fighters, the E-737 airborne early warning and control aircraft, and the KC-330 transport plane, as well as Washington's F-35A and F-35B fighters. The exercise is aimed at enhancing the Allies' combined operational capabilities against North Korea's military provocations.
South Korea and the U.S. Air Force plan to master wartime operation procedures and check operational capabilities.
This is being done through drills which include combat formation, defensive counter-air drills, airborne alert interdiction, and close air support operations. Colonel Kang Geun-shin, the director of the exercise, had previously said the intensive training is similar to actual combat and will allow the Allies to respond to any provocation by the enemy. That being said, there is growing speculation that North Korea may stage missile launches in a show of discontent with the joint drills.
It is highly likely that North Korea will carry out various forms of provocation during this training period to create insecurity on the Korean peninsula.
North Korea, which has previously called such drills rehearsals for invasion, launched missiles during last year's Seoul-Washington joint air exercise. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The time is almost up for North Korea, as its pledge to launch a military satellite for a third trial within the month of October is now not looking too likely. We turn to Professor Brian Myers for the reasons why the launch may not be happening as planned. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Professor Myers, it's safe to say the launch is not happening, considering it's the last day of October today, right? Because there are no signs of or related activities were spotted anywhere.
Yeah, it does seem unlikely at this point, especially considering that North Korea has said nothing to indicate it's going to launch in the next few hours. The regime does like to carry through on its launch pledges, and it has a pretty good record of doing so. But on the other hand, it's not going to let itself be boxed in by them. or risk another failure because it's rushing things too much. So yeah, it doesn't look like we're going to be seeing a satellite launch today.
Sure. Let's talk about the second launch attempt back in August. Now, that failed due to a malfunction with the rocket's third stage, which the North claimed was not a big deal. Then what could be the reason there's no third test yet? Is it because the North hasn't fixed that issue yet?
Well, first of all, I'm sure those engineers and technicians are under a lot of pressure because the nuclear program is pretty much central to this regime's legitimacy, and it's had a pretty bad year. So a lot rests on this next launch being successful. So I think everybody, Kim Jong-un included, would probably rather fall behind schedule a bit than risk the much greater embarrassment of another failure. You know, it's possible that although the problem last time has been fixed, everybody wants to make extra sure that everything else is in order this time. And second, you know, this is a country in which the leader manages everything of great importance. And Kim has been pretty busy over the past few months, what with the Russia summit and the supply of munitions to the war in Ukraine. So I think this may be another reason why the satellite launch is falling behind schedule.
Sure. Professor Myers, you said it. The North would be pretty ashamed of the fact that the third launch attempt is not happening, considering the North normally, puts its words into action. It's probably feeling more desperation than shame, right?
Well, you know, I don't want to overestimate the importance of keeping promises like this. I don't think it's all that big a deal with the North Korean public. I think the North Korean man in the street has long since forgotten that pledge. And in any case, there's a personality cult in North Korea, which means that the leader himself is never held personally responsible for anything that goes wrong. So even if there is another launch and it fails, the domestic spin will be that the engineers let Kim Jong-un down. And I think even in Washington, D.C., nobody is now going to start claiming that the North Koreans are not serious about their nuclear program or that they're not going to get the job done at some point.
Right. Then how likely is it that Russia or Russian scientists have actually participated in preparing an upcoming launch attempt following Russia's, promises to help Pyongyang with space technology?
Well, it may be a reason for the delay that we've just been discussing. After all, the North Koreans have already stepped up and supplied the Russians with munitions and weaponry. So Putin may have been keen to reciprocate by dispatching scientists to North Korea, and they may have asked to delay the launch until they can take a look at things. But, I'm doubtful that the Russians trust North Korea enough to want to share really substantive expertise. I mean, you don't share secret high-tech expertise in return for low-tech artillery shells. And anyway, not enough time has passed for such a sharing to have taken place.
Right. In the end, it will be a fair exchange between the two sides. Now, our Choi Min-jung reported earlier, South Korea and the U.S. are conducting a large-scale aerial exercise this week. Professor Myers, that will probably bother North Korea, right?
Yeah, I think it'll bother the North a bit more than usual. I mean, granted, military exercises have been taking place here annually for over half a century, so they are routine to a certain extent. But these are extraordinary times, and by helping the Russian war effort in such a conspicuous way, I think Kim Jong-un has probably angered Washington more than his recent missile launches have done, and he's well aware of this. Plus, when your country has experienced U.S. carpet bombing, as North Korea did during the Korean War, you're always going to be more nervous about, say, stealth fighter jets or any sort of enemy aerial drills than about amphibious exercises or things like that. So some verbal expression of discontent is likely, and I think the missile launch might be timed to coincide with these exercises. But I don't think North Korea is going to want to push its luck too far, considering that Washington already feels provoked by Kim Jong-un's support for Putin.
Sure. The vigilant defense will go on until Friday. Let's keep a close eye on the regime's movement for the week. Thank you, Professor Myers, as always, for your insight and your time as well.
Thank you for having me.
A case of a lumpy skin disease was reported in Changwon, Gyeongsangnam-do Province for the first time on Monday. 29 cattle from the farm have been culled due to the outbreak. Agricultural authorities say after examining 20,000 cattle in 454 farms within a 10-kilometer radius, no other cases have been reported. As of Monday, cases of lumpy skin disease have been reported at 67 locations. The government plans to complete a vaccination of the cattle by November 10th, but says the number of cases will likely rise as it takes around 3 weeks for vaccinated cattle to form antibodies. An additional 2.1 million doses of the vaccine are set to arrive in Korea on Tuesday. South Korea has become a global cultural powerhouse on the back of K-pop and other K-content. And the nation's new culture minister, Yoon says he'll make Korean culture more accessible both at home and abroad. Our culture correspondent Song Yu-jin spoke to him.
It's been a busy 3 weeks for South Korea's new Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism, Yoon. Since taking office earlier this month, he's been crisscrossing provinces, engaging with industry officials. This is his second term as culture minister, having previously served from 2008 to 2011. Back in the role, Yoo says he will make Korean culture more accessible both domestically and on the global stage. On the domestic front, he's prioritizing the transformation of regions outside Seoul into vibrant cultural hubs. This involves establishing more state-run performing arts companies and what's called the Local 100 project, which spotlights 100 landmarks, cultural assets, and artisans.
We aim to engage with people who are eager to participate in this project, enabling them to immerse themselves in the unique culture, cuisine, and products of each region. This initiative is expected to breathe new life into regions outside the capital.
Globally, Minister Yoo envisions enhancing the competitiveness of Korean content by providing support for content creators to safeguard their intellectual property rights, as well as allocating 1.7 trillion Korean won or $1.3 billion for content creation next year. When asked about his top priority, his answer was amending the Copyright Act.
The revision should take into account the interests of content creators, producers, streaming services, and other involved stakeholders. I'll constantly engage, discuss, and communicate with these parties.
Based on these, the Culture Ministry will lay out detailed policies for each sector by the end of this year. Song Yu-jin, Arirang News.
It's been over a year since South Korea launched its digital platform government, which aims for more user-friendly administrative services. Our Shin Ha-young spoke with the head of the Presidential Committee on the body to explore what's been achieved and what still needs to be done.
Enabling people to receive services tailored to their needs by integrating information and data across the private and public sectors. This is what the Yoon administration has been focusing on through the Digital Platform Government Initiative, or DPG. First launched in September last year, a presidential committee on the digital platform government spent its first year creating an action plan.
The claiming process for actual medical expenses insurance will be simplified. Policyholders had to visit hospitals to obtain related documents and submit them to the insurance company. Similarly, for export companies, the process of applying for trade financing has been simplified by enabling electronic submission of documents from the Korea Customs Service to financial institutions.
These efforts have extended abroad. During President Yoon's state visit to the Middle East last week, South Korean tech giant Naver struck a deal with the Saudi Arabian government to create a digital twin platform, a virtual geospatial model of the real world for urban planning and management in 5 Saudi cities.
Establishing and disseminating a digital twin is part of the digital platform government's plan. The latest deal is the outcome of cooperation between the government and a private company. It is meaningful as it is the first export case of the digital platform government.
In terms of digital infrastructure, Ko says South Korea is a global powerhouse. But he thinks the country falls short in utilizing digital technology, which is the reason for creating the world's first use case of hyperscale AI across government departments.
We are creating a hyperscale AI for the government using refined data and reinforcement learning from human feedback, specifically from public officials. This can be used for data analysis and policymaking and addressing social welfare issues. It can be also used to prevent accidents like the Itaewon tragedy by analyzing traffic data to proactively identify potential risks in densely populated areas.
Last September, the South Korean government published what it calls the Digital Bill of Rights. Ko says that the DPG and the Digital Bill of Rights are inseparable.
The digital platform government plans to demonstrate the Digital Bill of Rights, focusing on improving people's welfare and rights. To alleviate concerns about misusing personal information, we'll establish a system that enables citizens to transparently verify how and where their data is shared and utilized within the government.
Under the theme of government innovation with the digital platform government, there will be an exhibition in November showcasing the achievements of the DPG and demonstrating how it'll shape the future of the government. 신하영, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Kim Si-young, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Hong Kong, where 4 former student leaders were sentenced to 2 years in prison on Monday for charges of inciting violence through their praise of a man who stabbed a police officer. The 4, Kin Sun Chang, Charles Kwok, Chris Todorovsky, and Anthony Yoon, are being held responsible for passing a motion in a students' union council that expressed deep sadness and appreciated the sacrifice of Leung Kin Fai, a man who took his own life on July 1, 2021, after stabbing a police officer. They were originally charged with advocating terrorism under Beijing's national security law imposed on Hong Kong following the 2019 pro-democracy protests. This charge was dropped after they pleaded guilty last month to the current charge of incitement to wound with intent. Beijing's security law has prosecuted and silenced most activists in Hong Kong who were involved in the pro-democracy protests. The Chinese government says the law brought stability to the city after the period of unrest. Now moving over to Europe, where Spanish authorities announced Monday the seizure of some 720 kilos of cocaine hidden among scrap metal in a truck. Police said the drugs arrived in the southern port city of Malaga from Costa Rica at the end of September. The cocaine was hidden in a safe buried under piles of metal scraps in the truck's container. Police had to use drills and tweezers in order to uncover the illegal cargo. Spanish authorities said the 8 people were arrested across Andalusia region in connection with the find. The bus is the latest in a series of operations undertaken by Spanish police, adding to the 9.5 tons of cocaine found in containers of bananas from Ecuador in August. Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, announced on Monday that its users in Europe will be offered the option to pay and subscribe to ad-free versions of the social media platforms. It is giving this option as a means to comply with the EU's strict data privacy rules. Following an EU court ruling in July to uphold the decision by German antitrust regulators that Meta's data harvesting methods are abusive, the firm had to come up with alternatives to meet Europe's data privacy standards. Starting in November this year, users of the app on desktop browsers can pay around €10, whilst mobile phone application users will pay around €13 for the advertisement-free subscription. The monthly plan is available for all users in the EU, European Economic Area and Switzerland. Argentinian football legend Lionel Messi has won the men's Ballon d'Or for the 8th time. In the evening ceremony held in Paris on Monday, the 36-year-old former Barcelona and Paris Saint-Germain star, who now plays for Inter Miami, was once again recognized for his contribution to Argentina's victory at the Qatar World Cup last year. He has won the most Ballon d'Or awards in history, 3 more than Cristiano Ronaldo. For Women's Award, the Ballon d'Or Féminine, the 25-year-old Spain and Barcelona midfielder Aitana Bonmati won it for the first time. Bonmati was recognized for her success in a club and country level, including a Women's World Cup win this summer. Meanwhile, South Korean defender Kim Min-jae came 22nd in the men's Ballon d'Or final rankings.
Good morning. West Coast and inland areas are covered with thick fog this morning. Visibility has lowered down to just 100 meters in some parts. So commuters had to beware of low visibility amid difficult driving conditions. In fact, the capital area, Chungcheongdo and Ulsan will have high level of dust at times today, but thankfully it will not be a full-blown dust storm. As for the temperatures, it's the last day of October, but it feels more like the earlier part of the month. And the skies will get brighter as the day goes on, so it's a good day for an autumn stroll or an impromptu outing in most places. Afternoon highs will be similar to yesterday, hovering in the low 20s in most places. Seoul topping out at 21 degrees, Gyeongju at 25 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Then frequent rain in the forecast in central parts of the country for the rest of the week, with temperatures staying way above the norms. Then a November chill awaits us next week, so enjoy the warmth while you can. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Wednesday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.